April 9th, 1964, 1:12 a.m. In a Harlem hallway that smelled like damp plaster and cigarette ash, a sheet covered a body and left only the shoes visible, as if the neighborhood was being asked to recognize the dead without saying his name. Nicky Barnes stood under a buzzing bulb and watched his best friend's feet like they might move if he stared hard enough. The phone on the radiator rang twice, stopped, then rang again, urgent, controlled. Nicky answered on the second ring, because nobody called at that hour unless they wanted something that could change your life or end it. A voice he didn't recognize spoke fast. "They're celebrating," it said. "2 blocks from Lennox. Basement Club. The men who did it. They think you won't do anything." But the voice cut off like the speaker had just noticed someone listening on another line. Nicky didn't ask who it was. He didn't say thank you. He only said, "Where?" Back then, he was a runner for a numbers crew. Envelopes, pickups, warnings delivered in plain language. He wore a gray coat with a split lining and a cheap watch that kept accurate time, which mattered more than style. He didn't drink while working. He didn't talk big. He liked clean decisions and short sentences. His friend was Leroy June Grant, the one person who spoke to him like he was more than a tool. June had a grin that could soften a tense room for a second and a habit of calling Nicky Professor, like it was a joke and a prophecy at the same time. The last time June said it, he stepped out of the Palm Court Lounge at 11:47 p.m., rain slick on the curb, collar turned up against the cold. "Professor," June said, "you count too much. Try living." Nicky watched him go, and 2 minutes later, 2 sharp cracks cut through the club's music. Clean, quick, confident. People ducked. A woman screamed, then swallowed it. When Nicky forced his way outside, June was on the sidewalk, eyes open, fighting for air he couldn't hold. A man in a leather jacket walked away at a calm pace, shoulders loose, like he had just finished a chore. No masque, no sprint. That wasn't bravery. That was protection. A patrol car appeared 6 minutes later with its lights off until the last second, like the officers had waited to avoid being seen. The cop who leaned over June didn't ask who fired. He asked who June worked for. Then he looked at Nicky's hands and said softly, "Go home, kid. This is grown business." The message underneath was sharper than the words. The shooter had a roof, and the roof had a badge. By noon, June's mother sat in her kitchen on 132nd Street with a funeral brochure open like a bill she couldn't pay. Nicky stood in the doorway and offered to handle it. She shook her head, tired pride holding her upright. "I don't want street money," she said. Nicky didn't argue. He placed an envelope under the sugar bowl when she looked away and left without a goodbye. Goodbyes were for people who didn't plan to make the world pay attention. At 3:40 p.m., in a cramped back room above a barber shop on Lennox, Nicky pointed at 3 men and said, "Tonight, you ride with me." Leon Shorty, Palmer drove like he owed time money. Calvin Shine, Woods could talk doors open, calm as a church usher. Frankie Price was older, quiet, the type who noticed everything and reacted to nothing. Nicky didn't choose them because they loved June. He chose them because they could keep their heads. Love makes men loud. Loud gets you buried. At 6:05 p.m., Shine went into the Palm Court for change and watched who the bartender feared. Frankie stayed outside and watched who watched the street. Shorty waited around the corner in a borrowed Buick Skylark, engine warm, radio low. Nicky stood near a phone booth and listened for the sound of careless mouths. 2 men on the corner talked like the night belonged to them. "Vic did it," one said, laughing. "Vic don't miss." The other nodded toward 8th Avenue. "He at the Capri," he said. "Basement spot. Don't nobody touch him. Cops eat at his table." Nicky wrote VC on a matchbook and folded it like a verdict. The Capri was a basement social club with a steel door and no sign, the kind of place that tried to look invisible while every important face already knew the address. At 8:22 p.m., Shine drifted past with a newspaper and saw the doorman pat down strangers but wave in certain men untouched. Frankie watched a plainclothes cop step out of a black and white, take a folded wad from the doorman, and disappear inside like it was routine. Shorty muttered, "He got a badge in his pocket." Nicky felt the anger in his chest turn into numbers. A straight revenge move would become a headline or a prison number. He needed leverage. At 9:10 p.m., he used a payphone and called a number shared among runners. A teenager named Mouse met him by a locked subway gate on 125th, eyes darting. Nicky offered $20 for one thing, where Vic felt safe. Mouse tried to laugh it off. "You trying to die, Professor?" Cash beat caution. Mouse leaned in and said Vic wasn't downstairs tonight. Vic was upstairs in the apartment above the Capri, counting money from a hijacked liquor truck, waiting for a man called Uncle Ray. "Suit," Mouse whispered. "Police radio." "He the roof." That name changed the night. A roof isn't just protection. It's permission. At 9:32 p.m., Nicky laid the plan out in the Buick. Frankie would kill the lights at the fuse box. Shine would keep the doorman busy with a bribe and a story. Shorty would keep the car alive and the street watched. Nicky would go upstairs first with two things: a roll of cash and a small tape recorder borrowed from a jukebox man. He wasn't looking for a shootout. He was looking for a sentence. Because a sentence, captured, repeated, carried to the right ears, could break protection without firing a shot. At 10:41 p.m., they moved on to 8th Avenue without hurry. Hurry is a spotlight. Shine approached the doorman with a cigarette and a relaxed smile. "My cousin's inside," he said. The doorman squinted. "Ain't your cousin in there?" Shine opened his palm. Cash sat there like a quiet apology. "He is tonight," Shine said. The doorman hesitated. While pride fought rent, Frankie slipped down the alley, found the fuse box, and flipped one switch. The Capri's base died. The hallway lights blinked out. The building held its breath. Then came irritated shouts and nervous laughter. The sound of men who believe the world will fix itself for them. Nicky stepped into the dark stairwell, tape recorder in pocket, cash in hand. Upstairs, a door opened. Feet shuffled. A voice laughed, careless. Another voice said, "Relax, we good." Nicky climbed slowly, listening. At the landing, he heard Vic's tone, too confident, too pleased with himself. He heard an older voice, smooth, annoyed. "You shoot outside a club, you draw eyes," the older voice said. Vic answered like consequences were for other people. "Eyes don't bite," Vic said. "They look away." Nicky knocked once, light like a delivery. A man opened the door a crack and saw the cash first. "Uncle Ray here?" Nicky asked. "Who you?" the man demanded. "A friend with a problem," Nicky said. "And I pay for solutions." The door opened wider. Inside, liquor cases stacked like furniture, a card table covered in messy piles of cash, smoke hanging low. Vic stood near the kitchen in a leather jacket, chin lifted. On the couch sat Uncle Ray, pressed suit, loosened tie, a police radio on the cushion beside him like a sleeping animal with one eye open. "Beek Smilat." "You lost." Nicky didn't look at Vic first. He looked at Uncle Ray. 2 minutes, Nicky said. "I'm buying truth." Uncle Ray's eyes went to the money. "Truth costs more." Nicky nodded. "Then talk like you're expensive," he said, and let the tape recorder show for a half second. The room shifted. Hands paused. A man by the window stopped chewing. "Beek Smilatigtanat." "Take it from him." Vic snapped at his crew. Uncle Ray lifted a hand, and the room obeyed him. "Not Vic, nobody touches nothing," Uncle Ray said calmly. Nicky clicked the recorder on. The tiny sound landed heavy. "June Grant," Nicky said. "Shot outside the palm court. 2 shots. Clean." That was a message. "Who authorized it?" Vic laughed too loud. "June owed," Vic said. June talked. Nicky kept his voice level. "Who authorized it?" Uncle Ray's jaw flexed. Vic tried to posture. "He's nothing," Vic said. "Just a runner's friend." Nicky stepped closer, quiet enough to force attention. "If I'm nothing," he said, "why are you talking so loud?" Behind Vic, Frankie appeared like he'd been there all along. The apartment door clicked. The deadbolt slid. That single sound changed the air. Uncle Ray's eyes flicked to the door, then back to Nicky, and the midpoint truth showed itself. Uncle Ray wasn't just protecting Vic for money. Vic was blood, family, the kind of protection that makes smart men take stupid risks. Uncle Ray's hand hovered near the police radio. Nicky's fingers tightened on the recorder. Uncle Ray said, "You press your luck, the city comes." Nicky answered, "You press that radio, this tape goes somewhere you don't want it." The room understood leverage in the same instant. Vic muttered, "He bluffing," but his voice had lost weight. Nicky pushed the question again, steady as a drumbeat. "Who authorized it?" Uncle Ray stared at him, running the options. Then Uncle Ray looked at Vic with disappointment instead of love. And that look hurt Vic more than any punch could. "You couldn't just scare him?" Uncle Ray asked. Vic snapped. He needed to learn. Uncle Ray exhaled. "Death brings attention," he said, and then he chose the roof over the blood. "Nobody gave the okay," Uncle Ray said carefully. "Nobody official." Vic acted on his own. Vic's face changed, betrayal turning him smaller. Nicky nodded once. "Then you fix it," he said. "You give me Vic." The room shrank. Vic looked around for support and found none. Men who had laughed at a dead body now did math with their survival. One dropped to his knees first, then another, then another. Soft thuds on old wood. The image locked into legend right there. Killers kneeling, not for mercy, but from the sudden disappearance of their protection. Vic stayed standing 2 seconds too long. Pride tried to hold him up. Nicky stepped close enough for Vic to hear his breath. "June called me professor," Nicky said. "He said I count too much." Vic spat. "You a runner." Nicky didn't deny it. "I was," he said. "Then you made me something else." Uncle Ray watched with respect, mixed with resentment, the kind that promises future trouble. Nicky turned off the recorder. Click, like a judge ending a hearing. He gave Uncle Ray terms, not speeches. June's mother gets paid, left alone, protected from whispers and visits. Uncle Ray nodded once because the math demanded it. Nicky didn't linger. Frankie unlocked the door. Shine's voice downstairs stayed calm, keeping the street from noticing the upstairs changing hands. Shorty pulled the Buick up smooth. At 11:19 p.m., Nicky slid into the back seat like it was just another errand. By 11:31 p.m., the Capri's lights returned and the music started again, but it sounded wrong now, like a party after someone read bad news. The next morning, Harlem did what it always did, turned fear into a story people could carry. A bartender said Vic was handed over. A runner said Uncle Ray chose the roof. A woman sweeping her stoop said she heard men went to their knees upstairs, and she didn't know why, but she knew it meant a new kind of power had shown its face. Quiet, controlled, surgical. June's mother found an envelope on her counter with enough cash to bury her son without begging anyone, and another envelope that felt like an apology no one could say out loud. She didn't smile. Money can't buy back a voice. And somewhere, in an office where men wore suits and pretended they didn't need the street, someone heard the story and asked the only question that mattered. Who is the kid who walked into protection and walked out alive? That question was the real cost, because once the street believes you can make a room obey without firing a shot, the street starts requesting your method, your nerve, your silence. Revenge is loud and brief. Reputation is a low hum that never turns off. Years later, when that night surfaced in conversation, people rarely mentioned the hallway, the covered body, or the phone ringing in the dark like it was asking permission. Those details stayed private, almost sacred. What people remembered was the apartment above the Capri and the way the balance of the block shifted without a gunshot or a chase. Men who had walked those streets for decades spoke about it in lowered voices, describing a moment when confidence drained out of a room and never fully returned. No police report ever captured what actually happened, because paperwork has no language for fear that arrives quietly and leaves behind discipline. Uncle Ray kept his position for a while, long enough to realize that protection is never permanent, only borrowed, and that borrowing always comes with interest no one warns you about. He adjusted his habits, his routes, his tone, because survival is just another form of learning. June's name slowly disappeared from casual street talk, but his absence reshaped the neighborhood like a removed brick that forces everyone to walk a little more carefully. People crossed certain corners differently. Doors closed faster. Conversations ended sooner. And Nicky Barnes kept moving forward, not louder or flashier, but more deliberate, more selective, carrying himself like a man who understood something most never do. Violence makes noise, but control makes history. Once the street saw that kind of control up close, it never forgot it, and it never stopped watching to see what would happen the next time it was tested.